Hi, everybody. Welcome to Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining me. Let's get a quick take on the city of Fort Collins deciding to appeal the overturning of its fracking ban. Meanwhile, the fracking commission assembled by Governor John Hickenlooper met for the first time this week. Patty Calhoun from Westward, you have cities with current bans, getting them overturned, but then part of the compromise that is part of this commission that just started this week. How is this going to come out for cities?
Well, let's remember that a very important part of this compromise was Hickenlooper pushing to give municipalities some control, certainly give them a voice. So as the commission grapples with what it's doing, and they seem to be having some trouble getting their hands on it. As we know, oil is slippery, and their mission is a little vague right now. But clearly, giving local municipalities a voice, and that includes Longmont and Fort Collins, is going to be an important part of that, because that was one of the key parts of this compromise brokered with Polis.
Brad Jones, political analyst. It seems that the communities might be kind of one of many sticky parts of the situation for the commission. Do you think they'll play a bigger role because they have these fracking bans currently in litigation?
Well, I don't have high hopes for this commission, partly because of its genesis, right? This is a device contrived to avoid a big fight at the ballot box. That was achieved. But if any change is going to happen, it's got to go through the legislature. These blue ribbon commissions don't have a very good history of producing any public policy that actually gets enacted. You can see that on the state level or on the federal level, right? We had a big deficit reduction commission. Nothing ever happened with that because you can get a bunch of smart people and stakeholders and they can all feel good and kumbaya around the table, but you've still got to enact something at the end of the day. And I think something that needs to be mentioned too about this process is property rights are not a matter of local control, right? And you really have mineral rights owners and surface rights owners that have their rights in this process too. It's not just a city council deciding that they find a particular industry unsavory and want to regulate it. So I do think that there has to be a limit to the local control, and that's, you know, for somebody that likes limited government close to the people, right? There are certain things that are better handled at a state level because that's where this kind of policy is probably best made, but you do have to make people feel like they're heard.
Eric Sonneman, political analyst. What do you think the community's role is going to be as this commission continues to meet as they just started this week?
I think the communities will make a fair amount of noise through the process. I think one of the things that the commission will have to address is the whole local control issue and how, whether the Hickenlooper position, at least up until a year ago, which is that this is for state regulation, or whether there will be bend and compromise in that. Ultimately, I largely agree with Brad. I think the prospects for this commission being terribly successful are very, very limited. This was a kick the can down the road kind of strategy. I analogize it to the truce that they were able to negotiate. This is a few months ago between the Palestinians and the Israelis. You could do basically a 72-hour truce, but you couldn't ever really do a permanent peace because the differences to get to a permanent peace are too great, but you can negotiate, hey, you know, let's quit firing our weapons for 72 hours. I think ultimately what Hickenlooper negotiated was our version of the 72-hour Palestinian-Israeli truce.
Penfield Tate, attorney at Greenberg Traurig, also a longtime state lawmaker. Is this just a commission building a 72-hour truce?
You know, it remains to be seen. My hope is that it's not. With bans being overturned and municipalities appealing the overturning of bans, there's a lot of turmoil going forward, and this commission has got to try to establish some sort of parameters for the playing field. I do think something will come out of it, but to Brad's point, whether the General Assembly can enact it so that the governor will sign it is another matter, because where I think we are is on both sides. I don't think either of them wants to be or can afford to be in a zero-sum game. The locals don't want to completely lose on this issue because it may transcend oil and gas and deal with other industries. Oil and gas can't afford to completely lose on this issue and be totally subservient to local control because it's going to clearly destroy their business model. So although everybody's still posturing as they were before, both sides really need a truce and a compromise and someone to broker a deal, because neither can afford a complete and total loss.
The controversy over teacher pay raise systems and the AP history curriculum to continue to make headlines in Jefferson County this week. Large numbers of high school students walked out in protest from all corners of the district throughout the week. Patty, this was the big headlines even on the news. You saw students, there's Columbine or Dakota Ridge or Ralston Valley, they're all over the place. Some students knowing exactly what they were protesting, some of them obviously taking advantage of sunshine and energy. What an impact do you think these protests will make on the Jeffco School Board making these obviously controversial decisions?
Well, I walked out of high school to protest the Vietnam War, and I'm not sure that we were the ones who stopped it, but I do think these students have at least are making the Jeffco School Board sit up and take notice some. We were talking last week during the web section about the teachers who had walked off, and that was a good example of why we only single subjects on Colorado initiatives. It gets really confused if you're mixing things together. And there's a very different issue here with this AP history test and trying to look at that curriculum and overturn that curriculum than there is with the teacher's performance. So I want to really look at the AP history test curriculum, which, by the way, is this thick. And actually, I read through it, and it looks pretty good to me. It looks very much like my AP history curriculum looked like way too many years ago, which was the best class I ever took, I think, in my life. And the fact that high school kids are talking about history, they're even thinking about history, is fabulous. I think the fact that high school kids are learning civil disobedience and First Amendment from a very active firsthand experience is fabulous. I think, and you've got to look at the proposed curriculum study from Julie Williams and other board members, which is actually very clear about saying that the AP history class should not be condoning civil disobedience. And civil disobedience has played a very important role in Colorado's history, in the United States history. The more these students learn about it, the better. I would also advise not to cite Texas as a good example of where history should be. The more we study history, the better, and I think these students are getting a really valuable lesson right now.
Brett, it doesn't seem like the Jeffco School Board, the new conservative majority that were elected in 2013, are bashful about attention or controversy. They have found themselves in headlines over and over again and only seem to find a new way to do it as the year continues. Do these protests make any changes? Is it too much heat, or hey, it's par for the course, that's what we're here to do?
I think somebody with an ear Jeffco School Board there, and remember, nobody expected this conservative majority in Jeffco, right? Douglas County was where all the focus was, and all of a sudden Jefferson County has this sort of conservative-leaning school board, and I think some of that shows in the fact that they weren't really prepared to win, right? So now you're in office, and gee, you're really fired up about changing the school board, and there's a lot to change, and there's a lot that needs to change in Jeffco, right? But try to fix one thing and then move on to the next. You now have these two issues really conflating each other, right? The issue that I think is most important is the one that you alluded to, the teachers, the evaluation, the relationship with the union, right? That's something that can actually have a very long-term impact on the future of that district in a positive way. I think, yes, there are things to talk about with curriculum. Some of this, I think, is even against this backdrop of Common Core and this sort of hegemonic move with curriculum, but bite off one thing and do it well. And I don't think this uprising from the students is particularly organic. You have a very active teachers union. You have a lot of parents who are not particularly happy with the schools. And I think probably there's a very small number of students who actually know what they're talking about. It's very easy to walk out of class and enjoy the sunshine. It's harder to show up at a school board meeting and make an articulate argument, which would actually be the positive message that we could send these kids is be part of the process, right? Civil disobedience, this is not kids being sent to the back of the bus because of their skin color, right? This is an AP history curriculum.
Right.
Learn about the process, the way it works, instead of just raising a fuss.
Sure. Eric, it seems at the end of the day, while you had a lot of protest students, we're still talking about a curriculum, whether you like it or not, that's affecting, I gotta believe, a very small percentage of the average high school students. I remember I was in high school ago. It was a class of 30 kids. We had a pretty decent sized high school, but it wasn't like this was the overall history curriculum that was going to be taught for K through 12. It was one course. Does that seem to matter? People just are excited to protest something when it comes to this school board?
I don't know, when we were all back in high school and talking about our curriculum, there was a lot less history back then. A lot has happened. A lot has happened in the meantime. I look at this whole situation, I flash back a number of years ago when the Denver School Board, remember, was so divided that they hired a marriage counselor to go mediate some kind of a retreat. I mean, it would seem to apply now in Jefferson County. There is plenty of blame to go around here. Change is hard, and a new majority, for better or for worse, was elected. And I think there is blame to go to those sort of establishment interests that have had their run of the show in Jefferson County for 20 or 30 years and are reluctant to consider any new approaches, new ideas on anything. There is blame to also go for this new board majority. They are not all wrong, but they sort of are all thumbs in terms of how they have been handling different pieces of this. Brad is essentially right. Wherever you come philosophically, you only have a limited amount of political capital. And if you are wasting your political capital on these sort of sidebar issues, or at least put them off and take everything in its time. But you can't change the world overnight. And the issues of teacher pay, evaluation, merit, how merit is evaluated, and all the rest certainly trump this issue that only affects a very small minority of high school students in importance. So this thing has been a sideshow, but it is a damaging sideshow in terms of its impact on the ability of the new superintendent and the new board majority to ever coalesce something and have goodwill and be able to govern.
Penn, if the Jeffco School Board reaches out to you as maybe not a marriage counselor, but you've been a state lawmaker and probably a mediator in several difficult controversies, what's your advice to school board as they move forward?
You know, a couple of things. First, I'd tell them, why don't you sit down and talk to groups of these kids? And in telling kids to engage in the process, I don't think is always a good answer, because typically school boards is that it's rare that students show up. Sometimes parents show up because students aren't really considered a part of the process. They're to be governed and educated, but not really seen as true constituents. So I actually applaud the students for what they're doing. And I know some of them have no clue why they're hanging out on the street and in the sunshine, but they're kids. And part of what should be done is educating them in terms of process and content. The other thing that I would tell the school board is, I think fundamentally the board needs to understand its role. It's supposed to be a board representative of and representing the best interests of the people in Jefferson County with regard to educating their kids. You're not in a position where you get to dictate to everybody your worldview of things. That's not the job. The job, I think you should look to innovate. I think you should try new ideas, because mercy knows in K-12 systems around this country, we're failing far too many kids, or kids are graduating with diplomas but are functionally illiterate and not capable of working in society. But the board's got to take responsibility for some of this. And it's not a function of whether you agree with them politically. For them to govern, they have to get consensus. They have to work with teachers and parents and students. And if, regardless of who elected you, if students and parents and teachers are all telling you, we don't think so, it's the board's responsibility to find the way to communicate with them, because they serve at the pleasure of all of these other folks they're arguing with now.
6th Congressional District candidates Mike Coffman and Andrew Romanoff went head-to-head in a Denver Post debate this week. Candidates' views on climate change, women's rights, and the validity of campaign ads dominated the dialogue. While many saw Romanoff as aggressive and remaining on the attack mode, others described Coffman as calm and refusing to engage. And that was different from their first debate that they had a little bit earlier than that. And if you're looking for the Channel 12 version, we will have the 6th Congressional District on Friday, October 10th at 7 p.m. But Patty, with all that being said, the governor's race and the Senate race have been taking a lot of the oxygen out of the room. Finally, the 6th CD is starting to get a little bit of the headlines. What did you make of the Denver Post debate?
I will tell you after Brad goes.
That
his
is an
turn.
excellent point. Thank you very much, Patty. Brad?
So you can do that during a debate. You can be polite.
Always
See, look
fair.
at that. Always on our toes. Thank you very much, Patty. Brad, thank you so much. Your point now.
Dominic, this is so boring. Who can? Okay, climate change, women's rights, and the validity of campaign ads. Is that on the radar of anybody who is in the 6th Congressional District? Does anyone care? I mean, I was not at this debate, although I have to say, you know, a lot of this is inside baseball, and I think I don't know if it's a product of the media shrinking or just navel gazing or two candidates who just don't want to engage one another. But this is, I mean, this debate didn't tell us anything useful about these two candidates' positions, and Mike Coffman, from the ads that I have seen, right, he's trying to be as left liberal as he can be. I mean, this ad about him and protecting women and all this kind of stuff, how far off can you be from the message that you should be promoting, which is Andrew Romanoff is far left liberal, right? He was in the State House. He will be in Congress, and tie him to Barack Obama. I mean, this is free advice. Please, take it. It's not that hard. I don't know why all of these other issues. I would say, though, that Andrew Romanoff has run for a number of things since he was last elected to anything, and I don't think he's got a whole lot of discipline as far as his message goes. There's a lot of wheel turning in his campaign, and I think he's very passionate about these issues. It's just that they're not all that in line with the reality on the ground, right? If you're Andrew Romanoff, talk about job creation, right? You don't have to change who you are, but just highlight those different pieces. Right. So I don't know if it's the Denver Post's fault or the campaign's fault, but not you.
Eric, what'd you make of the debate and where the CD6 campaign should be going?
Well, wait till you and I get our crack at him, Dominic.
That's right.
We'll have a much more constructive debate per Brad's critique here. It struck me that Coffman was playing a little bit of rope-a-dope in that debate. It makes me wonder if this becomes a pattern, if Coffman continues to take that tack with Romanoff, it makes me wonder if he does have some internal polling that shows him in the driver's seat here and trying to avoid the mistake and not feeling it necessary to engage in that kind of tit-for-tat. There are two big trends here that are competing with each other, and that's going to determine who wins this election. Romanoff is banking on the Latino vote, which is a rapidly increasing constituency, particularly in that congressional district. And he is basically banking everything on that Latino vote, putting him over the top. For Coffman, he's banking on the national atmosphere, the national, if there is a Republican wave, even if there's just a ripple nationally, that might be enough in this kind of 50-50 congressional district to keep Coffman in office. Brad talks about the races that Romanoff's been in. I'm an interesting political personality in the state. He's one of the more gifted politicians I've seen in a long time, except for one key piece that is part of political gifts, which is a sense of timing. And Andrew has this pattern of being in the wrong race in the wrong year. When you think about it, if he had played his cards differently, we could be sitting here talking about a Governor Andrew Romanoff completing the 8th year of a reasonably successful and popular governorship, because he thought long and hard about running for governor back in 2006. Didn't want to take on Bill Ritter. Didn't want to take on Bob Beaupre. He would have beat both of them. He would have beat Ritter based simply on the choice vote in the Democratic Party. And it was a Democratic year. Whoever was the Democratic nominee was going to be elected governor back in 2006. So it's an interesting dynamic of all the political gifts and talents Romanoff has, but never quite being able to pick the right race in the right year.
Penn, where are you at in the CD6 campaign?
It's interesting. I agree with everyone around the table. Of the three topics they debated, the only one that voters are really focusing on is the woman's choice issue. That's got some play. There are a number of other issues they want to talk about, but for some reason, the campaigns aren't focusing on them, and the media doesn't appear to be focusing on this. I sort of agree with Eric. I thought that Coffman was trying this rope-a-dope strategy. The problem with rope-a-dope is, as George Foreman, learned, you can get knocked out by it. If you're the incumbent and you're trying to play it safe and go to debates and not say anything, what you can do is give the appearance of being disinterested, aloof, or you just don't care. And some of the feedback I'm hearing from folks is that that's exactly how some people perceived Mike Coffman, who has not necessarily got the most engaging personality to begin with. And if you couple it with the fact that he looked disinterested or above it all, I think that doesn't work in his favor because he looks like the Washington insider who's too busy to be concerned about what's happening in the 6th congressional district. I don't know where this is going. I think people are right. Sometimes Andrew's message isn't very disciplined, but I'm hearing that he's got internal polling, Eric, that shows he's in the drought. And if that's true, Coffman's got to engage in these debates.
Patty, if we watch these ads, it seems that really only independent women like yourselves are the people voting, because it seems that only the ads are going in that direction of, how these candidates feel about women's rights. What do you think about the campaign in CD6 so far?
Well, there might not be an official war on women in the Republican Party, but there is certainly a war for women's votes across this state and across the country. And I'm so glad I let you talk first, because are you correct? At least 50% of the voters care about women's rights. And I would argue maybe even some men do. And I think what will happen is that's going to be an issue that will get people out to vote. Just the concept. We're women, we have to go out and vote. It might be they're thinking about personhood, they're thinking about abortion, they're not, but they're going to be thinking about voting because so many people are telling them they have to think about voting. And that's going to make the huge difference this year is who gets the turnout. And if you get a lot more women voting, the odds are Democrats are going to do better. It's amazing how the governor's race, the senator's race, and now this CD3 race, everyone is saying this is like the hot race in the country. And it does look like it's going to be that way. If I were Coffman, I'd spend a lot more time talking about, normally you don't care in a suburb of Denver as much about international affairs, but given his experience in the National Guard, given his experience in the Middle East, he can actually speak about a subject that people are almost scared to think about because it's so frightening out there. That would be a good thing for him to do. Romanoff could talk about his career in the legislature more. They don't have to talk about climate change. You're right, that's a non-starter. But we could have much more substantial discussions than we're having.
Let's certainly hope we see some more substantial discussions. Let's get a quick take on this last one. The civil trial of Marvin Booker, an inmate killed during an altercation with Denver County deputies back in July of 2010, began this week. According to the Denver Post, a former jail deputy involved in the death and key witness in the case has given misleading reports that are contradictory to video evidence of the incident. Eric, what's your short take on this?
Two very quick takes on the whole continuing issue around the Sheriff's Department. One, a very good move to bring Grayson Robinson, former Arapahoe County Sheriff, on board within Denver to try to clear up the backlog of disciplinary cases within the Sheriff's Department. Two, have this task force that Mayor Hancock appointed, and it still looks, I haven't seen any activity. I'm sure there's internal activity, but it's still crying out for something bold, for something public, for some decisive direction, and it just looks like a bogged down internal process.
Penn, what are your thoughts?
I cannot fathom why the city didn't settle as many of these lawsuits as possible. Right. The last thing you need, on top of all of the other crud, is a public airing detailed by witnesses who were there and recounting time after time what occurred. Number two, the appointment of Robinson is a good decision. He's a no-nonsense guy who I think will bring some objective eyes to it, and he's well respected. But number three, you just got to ask yourself, when we've talked about this repeatedly, what is going on within this department when people are behaving badly, knowing they're being videotaped, knowing that there are cameras all around them, and then denying what the video camera shows them doing? I don't know if it's colossal gall or what. I'm rendered speechless for a moment. I can't fathom how you do it. It's like, when you speed and, the cop has the radar gun. It's like, oh, well, you got me. These guys are on camera. Yeah. I don't understand.
Patty, your quick take.
It's interesting to me that the Hancock administration spent so much time early on talking about the Denver Police Department and the problems with discipline there and just reorganizing that whole thing. How could they have missed what was going on in the Sheriff's Department? It's not like there weren't complaint files. It's not like there weren't videos. It's not like they must not have noticed that some of them had criminal records. It just is baffling.
Brad.
One of the questions that I don't think we'll probably get to, but deserves a mention is, why do we have a sheriff's department, right? Most sheriff's departments in Colorado and the rest of Colorado also have law enforcement responsibilities. That's not the case in Denver. We don't need a separate sheriff's department. One, it could probably save money. And two, if it's sort of the forgotten department here because you've got your own problems in other places, at least consolidate things, and you might have some efficiencies. And also, I think this gets to the broader question of the civil service structure in Denver. It provides far more job protection and presumption of preserving somebody on the job when there are no shortage of people who would love to work in public safety in Denver, police and sheriffs. We have no lack of qualified applicants. We can find the ones that don't crack inmates upside the head.
It's our favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week, but let's make it a quick part of the show. Patty, start us off.
Let me return to Jefferson County, where the new school board is saying the next thing they're going to look at in the curriculum is health, the health program. So I think we can see full employment for the stork in those classes.
Brad.
My disgrace is just this perception of this war on women, right? It is a total farce. It is a creation of those in these races who think that they can hang issues around abortion and truly think that women are gullible enough to believe that a single politician in Congress has the power to take away their birth control pills. It's asinine.
Eric.
The White House, particularly some unnamed senior White House official who was discussing why Saudi Arabia needs to be so concerned with ISIS and talked about the border that Saudi Arabia shares with Syria. Maybe somebody needs to get a map of the Middle East because they are nowhere near each other.
Penn.
I still go back to the Denver Sheriff's Department. This trial is just going to be a public undressing. It's not going to be nice.
Say something nice about somebody quickly.
The Sand Creek Massacre Commemoration Commission, which has been working for this 150th anniversary that's coming at the end of November, which shows that people who disagree about history can still study and learn about it.
Brad.
For all our talk about law enforcement in a not so positive light, I'd like to congratulate a positive development. My friend Jordan Sherrill just graduated the State Patrol Academy, and he'll start patrol very soon. So congratulations, Jordan.
It's great. Eric.
The Jewish high holidays, we're in the middle of them, to our and the Jewish community of Denver. Happy Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
And although he's sometimes been controversial, a shout out to Eric Holder, who's going to be leaving the Obama administration. His defense of civil rights and civil liberties, and frankly, his aggressive war on corporate criminals, I think is to be commended.
That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We do want to tell you about two special events happening soon. Next, October 1st is October 1st at 7 p.m. is the second episode of Both Sides of the Story, our new high school debate series. Two very talented high school students will both tackle the sides of Amendment 68, which would expand gaming at horse race tracks. You won't want to miss it. Secondly, this is our big favorite. Colorado Inside Out is taking our act on the road. That's right. Friday night, October 3rd, that's next Friday night, we'll be at the Highlands Ranch Library. We'll have a meet and greet at 6:30 p.m. And at 7 o'clock, we'll go through the week's events and take live questions from the audience. The event is free, but seats are limited, so go to cpt12.org for details. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Good night.
My name is Sarah Newberry, and I am the floor director here for Colorado Inside Out and Colorado Public 12. And what I mainly do is I am the go-between the control room and the talent. So I am listening in on my headset, and they are giving me direction on when to tell the talent to stand by, whether or not I need them to read through their script, whether or not they need to look at a certain camera. They tell me, and then I will go ahead and relay that onto the talent.
Here we go. Studio, are you ready?
Yes, sir. We're ready on the floor. So one of the responsibilities of the floor director is making sure everything on the floor is in its place and ready to go for the television show that we're going to tape. So that includes making sure set pieces are correctly placed on the floor, lighting is in the correct place, and shooting the correct places. Set pieces, which tables and chairs, they are in not only in alignment with the camera, but in alignment with the set pieces behind them. Another one of the things I like to do, and it is part of the floor director's job, is to make sure all of the talent is properly mic'd and ready to go, what we call camera ready. So if they need a little makeup, they have water available to take a sip, they have the correct script in front of them, and they're seated in the correct chair. Another one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure everyone is looking good for television. My motto is if they don't look good, I don't look good. And my name's on the credits, so I want to make sure everybody on set is looking their best. So I make sure everybody's hair is set in case they have a couple of flyaways, get those down. Everyone has a tendency to look a little shiny on TV, so we always have a little bit of powder, and I have it marked for this is my lightest powder. So just have a little powder handy, knock down some of the shine, and just make sure overall that everybody looks and feels their best so that they can present themselves great on TV, which makes for a great story, which makes for a great show. So that when the all-important time comes and the director is in my ear saying,
Floor director ready for mic and cue.
stand by, we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, and I get them going. So I'll see you on the next episode of Colorado Inside Out.
I have no idea. Why do elephants paint their toenails red?
To hide in cherry trees. No, wait, no, I know it. Okay. No, wait. Have you ever seen an elephant in a cherry tree?
I have not.
Apparently it's because you never see one.